Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Antone Arns. I live at 2210 Southwest 15th Street. And when my mother-in-law and father-in-law moved onto 28th Terrace, when their house was completed in the 1950s and brought their young family with them, I can't imagine that they ever, in their wildest dreams, thought that 50 years hence, a Walgreens store would appear in their front yard. My concerns primarily as a tax-paying citizen of Topeka who doesn't live in the neighborhood are, as I drive around Topeka, I see a tremendous amount of commercial available property. And it sounds to me like we're making just one more of those commercial properties available if we move this store. After having driven off 28th Terrace many times through my adult life, many times with harrowing left turns onto Gage as a northbound vehicle, I wonder whether anybody's considered the line of sight distance that cars would have either turning off of 28th Terrace as they do now, as Gage curves at that point across the bridge, and have considered what possible accidents could occur if you put yet one more entry-exit point that would allow left and right turn from that new Walgreens store, not only on Gage Boulevard, but on 29th as well. And it's just inconceivable to me that there could be no study of the conflicting traffic patterns, left turn primarily, because you could have left turn going on Gage Boulevard, southbound and northbound, that would have multiple opportunities in that strip from 28th Terrace to 29th Street for accessing businesses on the east side of the street as a southbound traffic, or on the west side of the street as northbound traffic, that would absolutely cause tremendous problems of vehicles interacting with one another. Very, very dangerous. That really concerns me, and I've even had difficulty with no access points getting onto 28th Terrace as a northbound vehicle on Gage trying to turn on 28th Terrace. So the whole traffic consideration to me is really scary. And that doesn't even mention one of the primary concerns, of course, is that those residences that are left, what do we expect is going to happen to the valuation of those residences? If we say we're doing this to clean up a neighborhood, all we're going to do is set it back another block or two and allow residences to be going into rental and the same type of things happening. And it really isn't a crime issue. That's a police issue. That's not the zoning commission's issue. It's about families wanting to live there, like my in-laws and their children that want to live in a neighborhood. And that's what we should value in Topeka, not making more commercial space available and leaving the old behind. That's just a warped, it seems to me, a warped way to think about how our city's going to become better. So I really appreciate your thoughtful consideration of this, and I'd hope that you'd vote no on this proposed change. And I appreciate the chairman's availability to let me speak on this issue. Thank you very much.
Just a minute, Mr. Arns. Somebody might have a question for you.
Oh, okay, well.
Any questions for Mr. Arns?
I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned that your folks lived on 28th Terrace?
My in-laws.
In-laws, do you recall the address?
4016
4016.
Southwest 28th Terrace.
Which is west?
It's right
Where
across
this
the street from the circle of
Right across.
roses and just north of the fence line.
Thank you very much.
Probably the closest access to that development, unless you're sitting on the sides of it.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Arns?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Beck?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Chris Huffman. I office at 534 South Kansas Avenue here in Topeka. I'm a registered professional engineer, and I've been asked by Mr. Hutton to make a few comments tonight. I was asked by Mr. Hutton and the principals in the development on the southwest corner to take a look at the traffic impact analysis conducted by Cobb Valley. There are some concerns I have with the way that study was conducted and some of the conclusions that were reached and the foundation for some of those conclusions. The most predominant of those being the access arrangements that were proposed. I spent 15 years with the Kansas Department of Transportation, 12 of it in access and corridor management, and I teach access management, location, and design for the National Highway Institute as one of 2 national senior instructors. And anytime I hear about a proposal for a drive to be offset from another drive across the street, that's concerning to me, especially given the direction of the offset that's being proposed on 29th Street. Because of the direction and the small dimension of the offset, an eastbound to northbound turning vehicle will compete for the same space potentially at the same time as an westbound to southbound left turning vehicle. And that is something called an overlapping left turn conflict, which as a traffic engineer concerns me a lot, because that's pretty much patently the most dangerous situation you can have. Couple that with the fact that there doesn't appear to be any traffic analysis or consideration of any historical crash data along this intersection, and I'm not sure there is sufficient information provided in the TIS to draw any conclusions regarding the safety of the proposal. Regarding the capacity of the proposal and the capacity conclusions, I note that the traffic impact study utilized a synchro simulation model. There's certainly nothing wrong with synchro. It's an excellent program, but because of the nature of synchro, it's very, very important that a field calibration be conducted as part of the analysis, and observing the traffic, the overall cycle length that was utilized in the traffic impact analysis, and timing out the cycle length as I was standing out there. I'm coming up with cycle lengths that are substantially different than those which were assumed in the TIS. Sufficient enough that it could drastically alter the capacity calculations of the 29th and gauge operations. I'm unable to replicate the conclusions of the 29th and gauge traffic impact analysis capacity computations, and therefore really can't get a feel for the baseline of how that intersection is currently operating. And because there's no way to get a baseline on how it's currently operating, there's really no way to reliably gauge what the impact of the additional traffic would be. I understand the conclusion that there wouldn't be that much additional traffic. Putting on my appraiser hat for just a moment, I'm not certain how a commercial development that will ostensibly not generate much traffic could possibly be financially feasible, but putting that aside for the moment, if you take a look at figures 4 and 5 in that traffic impact study, you will notice a difference in those numbers. Traffic is being added, and I'm not sure that there is sufficient information provided in this TIS to allow this body or any other to make an informed decision. In standing out there and watching the traffic for a time, the west leg of the intersection was obstructed by a construction zone, as was the south leg. So I limited my observations to the north and the east. On the east leg on 29th Street, I stood in front of the power substation and watched cars back all the way up the hill. And so if I were reviewing this on behalf of KDOT or anybody else, I would recommend rejecting the traffic impact study. If there are any questions I can respond to, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Mr. Huffman, it was mentioned that this currently has a level service D, and that the development would not change that level of service. Do you have any comments on that?
Mr. Lackey, when I teach a seminar on the organization and review of traffic impact studies, the first words out of my mouth are always, I can make the answer whatever you want it to be. The traffic impact analysis software programs that are out there are sufficiently complex that relatively small modulations in input parameters can vastly affect the outcome. And that's why I say, especially in the case of synchro, field calibration really is critical, because synchro does not follow the highway capacity manual, which is considered to be the foundational document in such matters on all things. And that's not even to say it's wrong, it just doesn't follow highway capacity manual on all things. And because of that, it tends, in my experience, to overestimate capacity and underestimate impacts.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Huffman. Under your item, I can't remember which page it is here, but it lists site-generated impacts. You talk about the ITE study derives its information from studies in California, Colorado, Florida, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Jersey. The premise being is that it doesn't derive its information from local studies. And I think anyone that's worked with developers obviously has relied on traffic studies that you follow some similar premise. Is your observation here that something was left off, or I mean, what I guess what I'm wanting to hear is, was the study not adequate from that context? Meaning that is that not a standard approach, or was there
Use
something
of
non-standard here?
ITE trip generation is a very, very commonly utilized document in traffic impact study, and it always has to be taken with a grain of salt because of the nature of the statistical computations that go into this thing. There are three things that almost always concern me when using ITE trip generation, and I utilize it myself. I'm not wanting to kick any dirt on it, but those other states that submitted studies to ITE to generate those average rates without understanding how in each of those cases there is a split in demand between vehicle, transit, petacycle, pedestrian. It's challenging to try to compare those studies directly to the central part of the U.S. It's also difficult, given the number of Walgreens that exist in this local market, how even just a survey of those local store managers wouldn't provide a pretty good idea of approximately how many customers they have in their stores on a given day, which would at least allow a reality check for the ITE numbers. Finally, without knowing where this new proposal, what its market area is and what the directions of approach and where the productions and attractions are coming from for this proposed new store, there's no way to reality check the ITE numbers and no way to cross-check the trip distribution assumptions that were contained within the traffic impact study. So I don't think there has been sufficient cross-checking or detail on that point.
I can say I've honestly used and have reference of the trip generation manual and know of it quite extensively as well. I feel like it's a really good tool for development that is not known or is not existing in any other fashion in the city. But when you have something that's already existing, that's the same use, same client, or same ownership, same type of store, it is valuable to use existing data. So, would you agree with that?
I would, sir.
Mr. Huffman, I was just going to ask you, you had mentioned in your report and here that you had made some observations on site. Can you tell me how long, how many days, how many, what the length of time was for those observations?
For 1 hour between 4:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m., which should comprise the peak period.
And was that a weekday?
That was a weekday. It was a Tuesday evening, I do believe. I should have the date in that letter, sir. If I don't, I apologize.
And that was with that construction in place?
It was, which is why I limited my observations to the north leg and the east leg, for that very reason.
So the letter that you had written, really, I mean, you didn't do an exhaustive study yourself. You were just commenting on what you saw within the study.
That's correct, Commissioner. I was not hired to generate my own TIS. I was asked to review a TIS that was provided to me.
All right, thank
Any other questions for Mr. Hupkins? Okay, thank you.
Right here. Yes. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I truly do not oppose the.
Ma'am, may I interrupt you just a second? Please give us your name and your address.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
My name is Kathleen Kinsey. I live at 2809 Southwest Gage Boulevard.
Thank you.
And I truly do not oppose the progress project that Walgreens is proposing. The 24-hour drive-through, I'm sure it's, progress. It's 2014. I look at it as jobs and for people, but I do oppose it's right at my property line. And I am totally blind. I've been in my home since March of 1987. I use the Topeka Transit lift. I use a cane. Travel on 29th and Gage itself is crazy. And I can't imagine. I can't imagine what travel would be like with a business that's right next door to my home. So, it's just, not opposing the progress, but just opposing it being right at my property line.
My name is Mark Kinsey. I'm my wife. Again, the address is 2809 Southwest Gage Boulevard. I'm opposed to it for the fact that, again, it comes right to the property line. Now, I don't know where everyone has gotten their statistics as far as the traffic, the traffic lights and all, but there are times that it takes me up to 5 minutes just to get out of the driveway. And that's pointing out towards Gage. I've come to the understanding the best way for me to get out of the driveway in a timely manner is to back up into the driveway. Okay, and our property, we have a paved drive, a paved drive, and I had gravel put in, we had gravel put in. There's times I have to pull up onto the gravel and make a horseshoe, back up, go towards Gage, and then back into the driveway in order to point out towards Gage. And there have been times, depending on what's going on, it may take 10 minutes to get out of that driveway. And I've been there since 1990. So I'm pretty adapted to what it takes to get in and out of that driveway. And then to put a Walgreens with the driveway right next to the property, right next to it's unacceptable. So I am opposed to it. That's about it.
Okay. Any questions?
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Lucky.
When you're trying to get out of your driveway, are you trying to go left or right?
Either way.
Either way.
There are times that the traffic, especially the turn lane, turning east onto 29th Street, will back up past the Sugar Creek Bridge. And then, like right now with the construction south of 29th Street, it's even worse. Because you've only got one lane of traffic that can go south. You got one lane that turns west and the one lane that turns east at 29th Street. So it makes it even more difficult. And then, one thing I left out, I'm a truck driver, so as far as the noise is concerned, with deliveries into a Walgreens, I don't care what size fence you put up there. A tractor trailer is gonna make noise, okay? Like I said, I'm a truck driver. I drive all over the state of Kansas delivering to National Guard units. Okay, so the noise factor, whether it's 5 o'clock or whatever, you're still gonna have the noise. I don't care what you put up to try to buffer it. You're still gonna, and then you're gonna have the problem with the trucks pulling in. They're not gonna be able to buffer that on Gage. And with our property being right there,
I do have a question for you. Knowing how busy Gage Boulevard can be, Mr. Kinsey, do you have kind of an awareness of when you hear the traffic there in the morning? When do you normally start hearing traffic?
Time-wise, okay, in morning time, 6:30,
Okay.
okay? Evening time, 3:30.
Starts getting busy again at
It
3?
starts getting real busy right around 3:30.
Okay.
3:30, and that lasts up until, say, 6:30.
Thank you.
Get it?
Okay, thank you.
My name is Melba Mitchell. I live at 4004 Southwest 29th Street, and I oppose this. Their driveway will be right next to my house. I won't even be able to get in and out of my drive and all, because across the street on the south side will be another driveway. So both of the driveways will meet practically together. And with their parking lot and them driving in at night and stuff, my bedroom is right there. So how is that gonna, all the noise? And I sure don't like to be woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning for trucks banging and all. And so I really oppose this.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Mitchell? Thank you very much.
My name is Pat Michaud, and I live at 4101 Southwest 28th Street. That's a few houses away from this, but my wife and I don't think it's a good idea to put a Walgreens on that corner. And here's my brief objections. I think there's going to be a lot of increase in congestion at that corner. We've lived there 8.5 years, and we lived there 8 years before, from 1990 to 98. I've been going through that intersection for over 16 years now. And even in 1990, the traffic was backed up to where the tanning salon is now occasionally, and up to Shunga Drive occasionally. And I don't know how anybody's going to be able to get out of Walgreens and make a left turn, go north on Gage most of the time, or make a left turn out of there off of 29th Street and go east on 29th Street. Anyway, the second thing is the residences and mature trees that are there now provide a buffer for the whole neighborhood against the traffic noise and the lights from the commercial property that's already there. And if you take that down and put a Walgreens and put up a fence, and you're still gonna be able to, the light effect and the noise from the AC and the delivery trucks is gonna have an effect on our privacy. And the congestion, the noise, and I don't agree with all the contentions about the crime, because we've lived in that neighborhood for 16.5 years, and I can't ever remember a police car coming to our neighborhood. Maybe once there was a house down the street that's a rental that has like a wayward home for troubled adults, and once there was a couple cop cars showed up there. They were having a domestic disturbance, but that's the only time in the last 8.5 years. I never hear any cop sirens. So if they put the Walgreens there, if there is a problem, which I don't agree with, if they put the new Walgreens there, the people next to it are gonna sell their houses, they'll be rental ones, and all you're doing is moving it closer to the people that already live there. And besides those points, the other question I have for the planning commission, this is the city planning commission, and my question is, how many drugstores do we need within 2 miles of each other? There's a Walgreens at 21st at Fairlawn. There's gonna be a CVS pharmacy at 21st and Gage, and there's already a Walgreens at 29th and Gage. And the other thing is, do we need to condemn residential houses to have a place to build commercial property? There's almost 14 acres at 29th and Fairlawn that just came on the market. I'm sure the three gentlemen that were on the paper Saturday would be more than willing to sell a little piece of that land for a Walgreens. They'd love to have a Walgreens down there at 29th and Fairlawn, I'm sure. You go south about a mile, or is it just a half a mile up the hill on Gage? There's 4 or 5 or 6 acres on the west side there that's vacant, been vacant for 30 years. There's a place to put a brand new Walgreens. Do you have to tear down 11 houses in our neighborhood to come up with a vacant piece of land to put a commercial property on? And the last thing is, if it wasn't for the fact that CVS Pharmacy is building a new drugstore at 21st and Gage, and then Walgreens found out, about it, Wittenberg and those guys, they wouldn't even give a hoot about that property if Walgreens says we need a new store because they put a new one down there. So the question is, should we lose our residential neighborhood feel because CVS Pharmacy put a new pharmacy a mile away at 21st and Gage? That's something to think about. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Mr. Minister, any questions?
Sir, I just wanted to clarify, you did say you lived at 4101 Southwest
4101
Southwest 28th Street.
Street, yeah.
Thank you very much.
And one other brief thing is, with the traffic gang, I'm concerned that there's gonna be people cutting down 28th Street to avoid that intersection, to go from Gage to wherever, to go down our street and be more traffic here, but, anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marshall Barber, and I'm a concerned citizen, lived in Topeka off and on since 1958. I do mostly residential real estate, and I'm interested in the future of Topeka, which is why I'm here tonight. The first 2 points I'd like to make are interrelated. The first one being that these developers have shown by the North Topeka project that they recently completed that they will be installing a high-quality building of optimum functionality as well as aesthetics. The second point being that within the city limits of Topeka, particularly, you might say, east of Fairlawn, but elsewhere as well, in the city of Topeka, one thing we suffer from is a preponderance of aging structures, which are nondescript and depressing to contemplate from a visual standpoint, when you're just driving from one point Topeka to another. And so my contention is that any time somebody that has the ability, number one, but number two, a proven track record of building attractive structures, it's going to enhance the overall livability of the area. It's going to make people generally feel better about being in the area. Take a drive around Olathe sometime and see what's going on in that town. They've got new things all over the place. And then you come back to Topeka, and well, yeah, there's some stuff on Wanamaker, and there's some stuff here and there, but people aren't doing much in town. And these are people who evidently, I don't know them personally, but evidently want to do something constructive in town to make Topeka a more attractive place to be. Moving on to my last two considerations. If you look at the intersections of 29th and Fairlawn, and I do residential real estate, by the way, so I'm kind of attuned to this. If you look at 29th and Fairlawn, 21st and Fairlawn, 29th and Wanamaker, and 21st and Gage. All of those intersections have a real buildup of commercial structures on all four corners, with the exception, of course, of 21st and Gage, where the fourth corner is the VA. And all I'm trying to say is that if you go around to the neighborhoods, around all these other intersections, they have not been adversely impacted in terms of resale by the presence of all these commercial structures on all four corners of the intersection. And the last thing I'd like to ask, is that whenever somebody wants to change, people always talk about, well, this might happen, this could happen, what if this happens? Well, I want to ask you, what do you think's going to happen if you don't approve this project? What are the consequences of keeping things the way they are right now? And what's going to happen to those houses along 29th Street and along Gage? What are you going to get if you don't do this project? More pit bulls, more deterioration? I don't know. But it's all in the future, and I think the odds are that if you do this project, the future's going to be a little brighter. Thank you.
Sir, just one moment, please. We'll ask for some questions. And also, I didn't catch your address. Would you mind stating?
I'm sorry, yeah, 2707 Harlan Court.
Thank you. Any questions?
I live in, in the interior part of Topeka.
Certainly. Yes, sir.
That's where I'm from.
I
got
know
a
where Harlan
question.
Court is.
Mr. Barber, do you own any property around this intersection at all?
I do not.
Okay. And being a residential broker, or not a broker, agent, then would you, in your opinion, would a store like this next to a single-family home improve or be deleterious to the value of that home?
Well, as I mentioned before, in the case of these other intersections, which have sizable commercial developments on all four corners, I haven't seen that the houses in those areas have been any more difficult to sell because of the presence of those commercial structures.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Hi, my name is Annie Wilcox, and I am a resident of the neighborhood. I live at 4013 Southwest 28th Terrace. My home is one of the homes in the proposal to be purchased. So therefore, my comments, in light of that, I'm sure can be taken one way or another. However, I've made some observations in the 7 years that we've lived there. My son is now 17. When we moved in, he was 10. Almost immediately, he told me about needles that he found on the sidewalks on Gage and on 29th in front of those homes there. And that has continued over the years since we've lived there. He has told me, as a young member of the area, that there are gangs, that there's crime that I had no idea about. And I think that I'm just asking the adults to understand and realize that that is usually the way it goes. The kids know what's really going on in the neighborhood before the adults ever do. Also, it is already noisy at the intersection. It is very noisy at the intersection. It is already filled with light. At night, I like to keep my curtains open, but I have one of them closed because of the lights from Sonic, or that area over there, shining in my room. It's already, very bright at times at night. I don't know, let's see. Oh, well, and also there's a ton of turning problems at that intersection. Turning into Sonic, turning into the bank, turning into the, Walgreens where it exists now. You have to be very careful. I know turning north onto Gage, from 28th Terrace is like a death sentence. When my son started driving, it's very difficult to turn left there. To me, in my mind, having a place for that traffic to go into Walgreens, it would even reduce the amount of traffic there. People are going to be turning into Walgreens as opposed to sitting at the light waiting to turn right to then turn into Walgreens. And with all due respect, I was sitting there wondering, why is it that these businesses where Walgreens is now, that Mr. Hutton represents, would be opposed to this? And honestly, the only thing I could come up with is that they would fear losing commercial, or whatever the word is, fear losing people coming into their stores because they wouldn't be in their parking area, the liquor store or the whatever. But as the one gentleman pointed out, we have a lot of Walgreens, we have a lot of CVS pharmacies in town, we have a lot of liquor stores in town. I don't think building this nice new facility is gonna take away from anyone's business. And, oh, the pit bulls were behind my house. I purchased a privacy fence so that I wouldn't be afraid they would jump over the fence into my yard. They fought in bloody brawls all the time. They're gone now, but anyway, thank you for your time.
Any questions for Ms. Wilcox? Okay, I did have one question regarding, you said the drug activity and things of that nature. You referenced 29th and Gage. Were you only stating that specifically for 29th and Gage size, or are you talking about the neighborhood itself?
You know, my son is not involved in drug activity, so as far as general drug activity, I don't know. But he has told me more than once that he has found needles on the sidewalk at the corner there. And also he and the neighbor boy were approached about purchasing drugs when they were walking to Sonic when they used to do that. So it was just that corner of 29th and Gage there that they said that they would find needles. And he didn't even know what they were when he first found them.
So on the arterials,
Yeah,
essentially,
on the-
not within the neighborhood.
Right,
Thank you.
right.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time. I ask that you vote in favor of it.
I am Cynthia Green. I live at 4025 Southwest 28 Terrace, and I am one of the houses that are approached for this project. I have been in this home for 11 years. I first moved into the neighborhood as a foster home, took in several children and have adopted those children, and feel that my little ones, 7 and 8, cannot be outside playing. My plan was to move and let go of the home to join the rest of them as rentals. I have rentals on all the surrounding areas of my home, and the home on the west has been empty for, I'd say, about 2 years. I have experienced the crime in the neighborhood. The house next door has had gunshots. We hear the gunshots. I wasn't sure where they were. We also have had a house more toward the 29th intersection that had quite a party there frequently, so loud that my little one could not sleep because of the noise. Sometimes we would take the children and go to grandma's. Since the children came out of those lifestyles, I don't want to live in a neighborhood that has had that experience, and those are the rentals along 29th and the rentals along Gage, our experiences along 29th. On the inner part of the circle, we have not experienced that. It's very clean, well kept, and everyone is pretty close in that area. But on the outskirts has been quite troubling. So my plan, even before I was approached about selling the home, my plan was to let the home go at a loss, if that's what I have to do. I have to raise my kids where there's not this kind of behavior behind us and off to the side. And I would appreciate it, whatever it takes to clean up the neighborhood along those busy streets. I appreciate if you would vote in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions before you sit down? Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
I'm Donis Williams,
And my husband and I own the house next to Cindy's at 4021. And it's the gunshot she's talking about, because we have had to replace. In fact, I've got a pellet hole in back of one of our windows now that come from, we have two houses that sit on our back, in our backyard that face 29th Street. And all that in there is a mess. It's been a mess for a long time. And our property values, 2012 and 2013, have gone down over $7,500. And our renters, I mean, we keep good renters. We try to keep the place up. I mean, like she was saying, her house and our house and the two houses next to us, people keep their houses up. But it's the houses the four houses that are on 29th Street and the houses that are engaged that are the problem. And you can find anything in your backyard in the mornings, because there's no sense in cleaning up your backyard, and they want the weeds to grow as high as it can, because they don't want anybody seeing what they're doing across over there. So, I mean, it's just, I hope somebody approves this, because we are ready for something else to happen there, so. Thank you.
So I guess I would ask one question.
Yes.
You said, so hope that somebody approves this just to clean up the neighborhood, so if it was something else, it would still be a viable solution, just something to clean up the houses.
Well, just to clean up, I mean, because as I understand, the landlord that has the houses that are on 29th and some on Gage apparently they don't care who they rent to, so you're gonna have this problem as long as you have that corner.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Shane Arns. I live at 2210 Southwest 15th Street. My grandparents have lived in the house at 4016, directly overlooking the circle with the roses, for my entire life. Growing up, my grandma's always had dogs. I have a younger sister and 3 girl cousins, and we've always been free to go out and walk the dogs into the night, 9 o'clock, 9:30, as usual bedtime walking the dogs. I've never had any problems. I'm not the toughest guy, and I'm not scared to go out there. My sister can go out there alone with no problems of crime. The crime does not come back into the neighborhood in my experience. And I fear that if a Walgreens is put in, there's more potential for people to try and jump the fence after they've stolen something, or drive to the back of the Walgreens, hop over, run in, and hop back. And that's one of my main concerns. I'd also like to cover a few other topics. The bus stop that was mentioned to be put in at the corner, I believe would increase waiting times at the corner. I don't exactly know where the bus stop is going to be put in, but if the bus is stopping on Gage, I don't know, they usually stop for 20 seconds or so. That would put your waiting time, as stated in the one traffic report, at 42 seconds, would put it up over a minute. So I'd be concerned about putting in a bus stop. And then having people cutting through the Walgreens to get through the intersection, which I know is illegal, to cut through a parking lot to get to the other side, but I fear that a lot of people would do that and do it quite quickly. And if there's people turning left, going off of 29 or off of Gage onto 29th, they might not see them coming, and they just zip out of the parking lot, and there would be potential for bad accidents. I've always been afraid of the corner of 28th Terrace or 28th Street turning out onto to Gage. There have been crosses and flowers put on the street pole by the Shunga Bridge because there have been deaths that have occurred that I've been afraid of. Every time I turn out of that corner, I look more than the usual number of times, and I fear that the curve in Gage there is just going to be magnified at the corner where people are turning left onto Gage out of the Walgreens. That's just going to create another place where people can get T-boned turning out. A couple other things. I would like to know the difference in the entrance distances from the existing Walgreens. They're far back on the property on the current corner where the Walgreens building is. And in the new project, I just would wonder what the differences in distance are, because I feel that it seems a lot closer together and closer to the corner. And I'd also say that Mr. Wittenberg has expressed that he still anticipates crime to come into the Walgreens because another area of crime, it mentioned, I think it's a half-mile radius in the crime report. There's apartments over there on Gage that have a lot of people that are similar to the ones who live in the corner houses. And that crime is just going to come over to the Walgreens, people shopping for cheap things. And I mean, I'm just afraid that that would continue the crime and not eliminate the crime problem. And another point is that the trucks delivering the goods would have to turn left into the Walgreens coming off of highways unless they drove clear across the city. No matter which way they came in on 29th or Gage, they would be turning left due to the direction that they come in off of the highway. And as far as the people who turn into the Walgreens, eliminating some of the traffic at that corner, I'd also like to point out that everybody who turns in has to turn out at some point, and that wait is a lot longer, both for the people who stop to leave gaps for people to come out and other things of that nature. So those are some of my concerns, and I'd really hope that you vote no to approve this. Also, all the vacant property that's available around the city I think would be great opportunities. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arns. Any questions? I see none. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak for or against the project? Okay, at this time, I think we'll open it up for just discussion amongst the commission. We won't close the public hearing at this point.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If I could, to ask Mr. Hutton or one of his people. It has to, you mentioned a bus stop. Is that, you're gonna have a bus stop on the northwest corner?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You mentioned a bus stop. Is there gonna be a bus stop on the northwest corner?
I think Mr. Wittenberg mentioned bus stop.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The
You're right.
marketplace.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Mr. Werner can
I
answer.
think there's a purchase by.
Yeah, you're right. My apologies for asking the wrong person.
During the planning stages, that we were working with staff, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority came back and asked us if we would be, if we would offer to put in a pad for a bus stop. But they at some point would like to put that in. They did not indicate where it would be. They didn't say it was gonna be on the hard corner. It'd be somewhere along 29th Street is what they were looking at, and possibly along Gage, but I think they were talking about 29th Street. So during those negotiations, we agreed that we would put in the concrete pad for that bus stop.
Does that mean that they're gonna move one of the three that are already around that corner?
Yeah, I think that, I might have staff address that. We just were agreeable to doing it.
Okay.
I just wanted to address that. I think the language we worked out on the PUD kind of leaves it open to a location to be determined if it's necessary and if there's a location that's suitable during site development. If a location's not considered suitable, then no, we wouldn't request that.
Well, the reason
We were leaving it open.
Okay, the reason I ask is there's currently a bus stop on the northeast corner, there's one on the southwest corner, there's one a block east of Atwood, there's already three there. There's
It
one
would be
in every
moved from
direction.
it would be moved from the one across from, I mean, at this point, we looked at it and thought it would be moved from the one across on the northeast corner. But the location, if there's not one if the location isn't suitable and it doesn't work, then it
Well,
would
then-
be requested.
You know, that creates problems with people queuing up behind the bus across the intersection then.
And that is why the language on the PUD kind of leaves it open to being put in only if it's determined to be at a location that's suitable.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Werner. Any other discussion, questions?
I had a question for city staff. On the two lots, the 4004 and 2809, was there any study or any consideration as far as the proximity of that driveway to the residential driveway of being a concern or safety issue?
I think the overriding thought was, the bigger picture there is the two Walgreens driveways, the further we can get them from the intersection, the better. So that's the overriding concern.
I would have to say I do share concern as far as the conflicting left turns. I do look at those two entrances, one being the existing marketplace entrance on the south side versus what would be a new entrance on the north side of 29th Street. Typically, if we are going to have offset intersections in practice of traffic engineering, we look at a minimum of 150 feet or 125 at least. These do not meet that criteria, and I do agree with the comment that there will be left turning conflicts. And it will not satisfy that requirement. Also, I was just looking at the distance from the intersection itself. Those entrances, neither one meet, I think the city's standard these days is 300 feet or even 500 on our major arterial street. Both of these come in less than 300, which is a minor arterial at least, standard. So I know we have existing conditions on the south and also on the northeast and southeast. Being that this intersection does have the traffic it does carry, I'm concerned that we aren't looking at what we require on such a high-profile corner and trying to meet those criteria and get those traffic numbers away from that intersection and movements. Also, even the idea of adding a dedicated right turn to get the cars off of 29th, because those are also island legs of the intersection. They have raised medians that prevent people to turn left and right in there. So it's a tight space. And standard width, but still presumed a little bit snugger when you have those concrete islands on the insides. I do have concerns with the traffic and the way it was presented. I honestly can say I have not reviewed the TIA or TIS, whichever one you want to call it, that was submitted with the project, but just looking at the comments and seeing some of the items that have been addressed, I would think that we would go back and look at this from a existing Walgreens facility analysis within the city of Topeka, and not at the 37th and Fairlawn, or 37th and Wanamaker. I don't think that one's as highly trafficked as others like 10th and Topeka. Maybe not even the North Lyman Road and Topeka Boulevard one. I don't know what their traffic numbers are during peak, but I would think that we'd want to go back and at least look at what the conditions are within the city with so many existing Walgreens already in place. Then we can be a little bit more assured. Granted that traffic is traffic and we don't know what it's going to bring essentially but we would have a better historical document to go off of.
I would agree with that. I think given the configuration of that intersection and the potential, I think we're going to be raising trips to that intersection. I'm not, wholly against the thing. I think it might be a good idea, but the traffic does. It raises concern, for sure. So I would be interested in something like that as well.
Could certainly go on to say I'm tickled pink about the elimination of driveways on 29th and Gage. That is a high profile, high traffic intersection, and we have a lot of driveways of vehicles that, unlike some that are able to turn around their driveway, back into the street, causing congestion, causing potential accidents. So the elimination of those driveways does excite me. I would like to see that. However, at the expense of doing something detrimental without proof. I'm not saying it's going to be detrimental, but I'd like to see a little more investigation on the site, traffic analysis.
Mr. Chairman, I'll echo your comments and also his. I'm uncomfortable with the traffic analysis that we looked at here. I think Mr. Huffman raised enough questions to warrant more in-depth study of this. I'm very concerned about conflicts on those offset driveways. I've experienced it myself trying to get into Walgreens off of westbound 29th into the left there. They have people coming at you head on because they're trying to get into the queue to turn left on Gage. And this one over on Gage is going to be worse than that one. Because that queue and that left-hand turn on Gage backs up a lot, as one of the neighbors mentioned here a while ago. So I would like to see a better traffic study. The development itself, I don't have a lot of problems with, but I'm really concerned about the traffic. I think we need to address it a little better. Or at least allay our fears.
Mr. Finder?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, to that point, to those 3 points about traffic, I would concur. I do think there needs to be more review by staff, not just with what was brought up tonight. Obviously, the comments by Mr. Huffman need to be looked at. We just got the memo Friday. I think we had a little cursory review, and what Ms. Driver mentioned, I think we need to do a harder review. Based on the comments tonight, based on your comments, I just wanted you to know that I too would like to have a tighter study presented to you for findings. And if it comes back the same, then at least we know that's, you know, we turned over that stone, so to speak.
I guess the other question that keeps burning in my mind is we talk about urban development and this corner being a great corner for commercial development. Usually you do like your high trafficked intersections to have commercial development. It's a generator for money, it's a generator for commerce. It would be interesting to know, we have 2 guys, one that did traffic reviews in the audience, to know is this corner suitable for commercial development in their opinion, or is it too congested? I think I know one answer, and I think I may know both answers. But you know, from a traffic side, what I feel is it is suitable for urban development and commercial development as part of what it is and where it is and what it's located as. However, I don't feel that the size of the parcel is adequate enough to address things with traffic concerns. To where we are removing driveways, but we're adding commercial entrances that are too close to the intersection. If that was expanded, and I know that expansion only leads to more removal of homes, but I would see that as a larger redevelopment, even more towards the 29th and Gage side rather than the neighborhood. That provides a very narrow strip that seems to lend itself more to commercial development. I'm not going to ask the 2 traffic engineers, and because I do know their answers from their sides.
Yeah, if I may expand on your comments a little from a staff perspective, you're right. I think there's a big picture here, and then there's a smaller picture that we're trying to wrestle with. And the big picture, we have done studies, and we know that when we strip out our arterials, it's not a good thing, not just for the traffic, but for the neighborhood. So having a nodal type development in the big picture is what our comp plan supports, and that's what the concept is definitely a good thing for the city when you have 34,000 cars coming through this intersection. So the current land use is not sustainable along the frontage, and as you heard tonight, it sort of spills over into the backs of some properties. So it's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge of what to do, and this is not. I'm not trying to minimize your decision making, or anybody's decision making here. It is a real challenge, but from a big picture standpoint, there's just not, the frontage is not deep enough to do a proper commercial development or any non-residential or even multiple family. So bit of a challenge, no less. So you try and work with mitigating those impacts to the greatest extent possible, buffering, setting the structure back, landscaping, fencing. The structure is going to be twice as far away from homes as where it is right now. The current Walgreens is right across the street from a row of houses. You try and do all of that, but at the end, you still need to feel comfortable that we're not creating a situation that's potentially not as safe with the traffic, for instance. And so I think that's a real, didn't pick up on some, it's a good pickup. I mean, we definitely need to show that.
I have one comment. I drive past the Walgreens on Wanamaker and 37th Street quite often, and I noticed that that facility backs up to residential right behind it with fencing and landscaping and fairly upscale homes behind it. And I personally haven't heard of any problems with that buffer zone and how it acts as a neighbor to those residences there. It would be interesting to know from others if there has been any complaints from neighbors in a similar situation with the Walgreens.
I was curious coming into the meeting tonight if any of the neighbors from that Walgreens would be here, because I know there was quite a debate when that one was being reviewed to be constructed as to how it would impact the neighbors, and the fact that they weren't sure they wanted it in their back living room. I think most of them probably use it today, but I'm not sure. I don't know that for a fact. But it would have been interesting if they came to voice an opinion on how that worked.
I think one of the things I struggle with is, in its current state of that residential, that area has deteriorated. If we do nothing, will that continue? And how does that look on the main arterial access? The other side of it is, from a business perspective, we now have it, while we may have gained another retail space, we've also lost another, and we now have another vacant building. I live in the Topeka area, and while that Walgreens is fantastic, I now look at another vacant building wondering what's gonna be there and when. And I think once those buildings are filled, then you see that progress. But to gain one building and lose and gain another vacant, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other at times.
I have a question for either Mr. Wittenberg or Mr. Werner. You may or may not know the answer. Do you know about how many deliveries a day or a week that would happen at a Walgreens, and trash pickup? What kind of schedule that might have? I'm thinking just large truck traffic.
I don't have the exact number, but I do know that the semi-tractor trailer truck deliveries that are in the morning are once a day in the morning. A lot of the deliveries to a Walgreens store, as you know, it's not a large box retail store, are done with small box trucks, bread, soda pop, those kinds of things, and they're throughout the day. In my past history of developing these stores, that question comes up a lot, and it's typically one delivery in the morning, and typically it's just right before the store opens. The store opens at 8. The hours of delivery that we talked about with staff at 5 a.m. That was what was suggested to us as far as a starting point. So we could do a little more research and find out exactly what that starting time is, knowing that the store opens at 8 a.m. The trash is all contained in compactors. There's a cardboard compactor, and there's a trash compactor. It's totally screened with brick masonry walls, and those items, I think, are just picked up once a week because they're compacted. And I can double check on that, but at least no more than 2 times a week, but 1 to 2 times. So.
Okay. In the turn from westbound 29th into the property, if it's semis going that direction, is the turning radius there for him to get in and stay in that lane? You know, there's 3 lanes across the entry. Is there enough room for that?
With vehicles coming out there? No.
All right.
No. It's that way on both drives. We've come in with 35 to 40 foot wide drives, as big as we can get. But there is a little spillover when a semi-tractor pulls in there.
So they'd almost have to be delivering
Before
this-
hours, yeah.
Before.
Yeah, and that's why I'm confident I can say that does happen before hours, before 8 a.m. Everything else is the smaller box trucks. during the day.
Thanks.
I have one question for Mr. Finder, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead, Mr. Rose.
Could you clarify, Mr. Finder, your awareness of the 100-year floodplain in that adjoining area immediately, the residential area immediately to the north, before you get to the Shingle Creek? Was it impacted in the last decade when we had issues just immediately to the west there down the Shunga area?
You mean, did it flood?
Yes.
I'm not aware of it. I don't know if someone could speak to it from the neighborhood, but I'm not aware of any flood. No.
Okay.
Flood streets, okay.
Just for, I know many of these areas were impacted with a change in the flood insurance zoning, but I didn't know if they actually had water in their homes, so, thank you.
You know, just looking at the site planning of it, I do hesitate to want a fence right up to the sidewalk in a residential neighborhood. I would love to see that pulled back if this was to go through with the same setback green space as is in the front of the yards and adjacent to it. I think that'd be an attractive change to help it fit the neighborhood a little better than the fence right up against. And I think it'd help you with your fence heights. And also maybe lose the retaining wall. I know it hurts your landscaping plan up against the curbing, but I think you could put that into the backside and the neighborhood side, and some of that would really potentially soften the look even more than just the junipers or evergreens that you were planning to plant back there. Give a little variety, and the rose bushes. One other question I had was for staff. I know we said the stormwater report was approved. It looks like it's just quantity. Was there no quality requirement for this site?
They did address quality as well, and indicated the final design may include native plantings and filter strips. I do have a comment from the stormwater report that they're going to be capturing the water now and directing it towards Gage Boulevard, where currently it's directed towards 28th Terrace.
That still doesn't treat the water with our regulation. The native strips, vegetative strips may, just looking at the site plan that was presented, I just saw a dry detention basin that drips out, drains over time. And I didn't know if that was an extended dry detention that provides some water quality enhancements per codes or in design standards, or what that is.
Mr. Chair, we'll look into that. If it sounds like we're gonna go back and review some of this stuff, we'll look into that. It may be a redevelopment exemption, if you will, when you already have impervious surface, that quality is not gonna be mandated in this instance. I can't say for sure, so we'll check.
Thank you.
If that
I know
works.
if you're not increasing it by, what, an acre
Yeah.
or so, they generally let it go.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose that we postpone the decision on this to a time when the staff can present us with a more comprehensive traffic study and answer the questions about the water quality that you just brought up. I'm not sure on what that time ought to be. Staff could determine that. Whether it be next month or a month after.
Does that be a question for the developers, if that timeline is appropriate to get some new data?
The one thing is, we really don't have a full month because we send out the stuff to you guys 10 days before.
Let's say, whatever it takes to
And,
get it.
We don't want to drag it out too long, but we also don't want to cut them short on being able to provide a product.
We're lucky, our engineers work for free, so it's not a real problem. Isn't that right? Okay. No, we'll certainly do whatever you would ask. The point that I would make on this whole issue, the common thread throughout,
every person spoke to what? Traffic is a problem today. We're here discussing zoning. We're here discussing a problem that already exists today. I'm not saying don't table it and have better information on, is our site plan correct? But there is no question about the fact that we have a residential area where the arteries have grown to a point that it no longer supports residential use. That is without question, regardless how we lay it out. Traffic is a problem. We'll come up with a better plan, but it's not gonna change the fact that it relates to the issues of residential use in this high-traffic area.
I would agree with you. It will not change it that much. What I'm concerned about on traffic is primarily is those offsets across the street. Is it worse to have the offset, or is it worse to move it closer to the intersection? And, you know, I've had a little bit of traffic engineering experience, so I'd like to see some convincing on that.
Is there a way to refine what we need to bring back to you that will adequately respond to your questions? I would hate to have to come back and redebate all of the other issues in the rezoning question.
I would suggest that you contact me, and I will set up a meeting with the deputy city engineer, Bill Fyander, as well as Terry Coder, our interim traffic engineer. And you can have whoever from your team meet on that, so perhaps maybe late in the week.
Certainly. And will there still be a response from the developer on the issues that were raised during open hearing?
Certainly. We have not closed the public
Okay.
hearing. We will continue that
Very
as
good.
well.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
And I did just want to say, one thing, you're fine to sit down, Mr. Wittenberg, but I was just saying that, part of our process, and that the city council does not get another opportunity at a public hearing, we do like to vet as many issues as we can to give them the information that they need also to make the ultimate decision. So we understand what our need here as a commission is. We also want to get the information out there for them.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just as
Mr. Hutton. Yes,
as
go
a
ahead.
point of information, to the extent that a new traffic study or an amended traffic study is going to be prepared, I am wondering whether it might not make sense to make sure that that was available for public view in a sufficiently large enough time frame such that additional review of that and potentially additional study on our part might also take place. What I'm getting at is, if we get a traffic study, a new traffic study on day 1, and then there's a hearing on day 10, we're not really gonna have much time to do anything meaningful with it.
Understand.
That's my point.
Okay. Duly noted.
Okay.
Thank you. So I guess it comes back to us. How long do we want to, well, I guess we have a motion on the table first. We haven't even accepted the motion.
Well, we don't have a second yet. I was
We
just
don't have a second
trying to
yet.
decide
I'll
whether we
second.
need to
So
rephrase it.
now we can have discussion on it. Thank you. I do think we need to answer these traffic questions and items that we've raised, as well as stormwater and some other things. What time frame do we look at as a commission as acceptable to bring it back? Looking at, if it's next month, we're looking at 20 days for them to get something prepared and back in. And then and I understand, appreciate Mr. Hutton's comment as well, as they would like time to be able to review it, as well as the public would like to review it as well if they need to.
Well, you don't, I think the motion did not make a date certain. I think it was contingent on having a complete study that addresses your questions and Mr. Huffman's questions. So, without knowing, I think I think it's an appropriate motion. I don't know if we want to target a date.
Yeah. Just leave it at your discretion, and you're the
Yeah.
developer to work out.
That's kind of what I had in mind, and ideally, what would be nice is if the two traffic engineers negotiated through staff, so that when we come back and talk about this the next time, we have concise presentation on it, and not, they just saw it and they want to start and ask a whole lot more questions. I want to hear all the questions at once. See what I mean? You get traffic, a better traffic study out of the developer that it uses hopefully some local numbers and data. And the opponents have time to look at that and come up with questions and comments, and staff, you kind of mash that together and get it all to us at once.
Yes.
Yeah, you see what I mean?
Put it in a big pot and stir it.
Yeah. So we don't have this constant back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'd like to see it one more time and get rid of it.
And I will commend you, at least, we don't want to have a traffic study debate at the meeting. That is
Exactly.
not the appropriate time to do it, and so if we can get all of our ducks in a row, so to speak, before, and present that to you ahead of time, that's what we're gonna do.
Sounds good to me.
Can we say no later than the August meeting in fairness to the developer? I mean, that would be 7 weeks or so. I think that'd be plenty of time.
I guess I'd ask the developer if that is a amenable solution to work with staff, develop a time frame, and bring it back.
We would prefer to deprive them of any information. No, we definitely want to work with this gentleman on making sure that he appreciates the work that went into it and the methodologies that were used. What I want to clarify, and I'm trying to hone this down, we're not really talking about counts as much as we're talking about conflicting traffic patterns, because the use already exists on this corner. It's not as though there's newly generated traffic. Everybody's already there. We know the counts.
Well, I would disagree with you. I'd say we're replicating the use across the street so we can duplicate it. And I think the traffic study needs to concur that the intersection would still accommodate that without
Yeah.
dramatic impacts. So
what-
I appreciate your concern that you're simply moving across the street, but that means we still have the existing property with the same existing use that a CVS could move in there tomorrow, much to your frustration, and provide the same service, and now we have twice as many vehicles.
So you want a full-blown,
I think
start
we're just
all
wanting to
over?
make sure that it's covering all its bases.
and is there a particular store you would like us to mod this against?
I'm going to defer to staff helping compile the information here.
I think
Okay.
you've got one other 24-hour store in Topeka, 10th and Topeka,
10th and Topeka,
which is a fairly high-trafficked area at
okay?
Similar
between
challenges.
4:30 and 5:30. It's a corner store. I'll leave that to staff's discretion. It's not for me to suggest and tell them, but that's what I was looking at. Okay, with that in mind, we have a motion and a second to delay this item.
Who seconded?
Mr. Beardmore? Any other discussion before we vote on the motion? Hearing none, Chris, please call roll.
Mr. Crook?
Aye.
Ms. Stubblefield? Aye. Mr. Gales?
Aye.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Mr. Jefferson?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Lackey?
Aye.
Mr. Beardmore?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
Motion passes with a vote of 9.
Thank you. I do want to say thank you to all those, the developer, the others that have come before us tonight to discuss this matter. We appreciate your concern and your comments, and we will take them into consideration as we go. Yes, Mr. Finer.
Mr. Chair, one thing that I might, since people are here in the audience, just hit me that we don't have a date certain yet for the public hearing. When we do arrive at that, we'll send out notices to the required, 200 feet? To the 200 feet, so, and we'll post that, just so you know. It's not gonna be a surprise when we have the meeting, so we'll get that out to the property owners.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Finer.
I move we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Get up and leave.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You can stay. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.